In crypto, there will be winners and losers, but one thing I can definitely say is those that are capable of rationally changing their course are much less likely to be losers. If we want to maximize the chances of not being a loser, then we have to be adaptive.
Does that mean that Bitcoin is at risk?
Dr. Gavin Wood is the co-founder of Ethereum,
creator of the EVM and Solidity, and the founder of Polkadot,
a protocol securing and connecting sovereign blockchains known as Parachains.
Assessing crypto is a weird thing. It's more about Bitcoin and Dogecoin. For me, success, I want to see utility. I don't want to see just vapid nonsense. And Parachains are able to do useful stuff.
Are Parachains and Layer 2s the same thing?
Turning Ethereum into just a roll-up compromises the product proposition of Ethereum. Product thesis of Polkadot was to essentially sort of beat it at its own game. And I think to a large extent, we did.
As crypto failed.
Going down the path to obsolescence and assimilation into the establishment that it was created as a backstop against, yes. Definitely. To say it's failed implies that it's over and we have to evaluate it.
Ethereum Layer 2 approach and execution failed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Why?
It didn't have any theory behind it. It was just a response to large individual projects that didn't want to see their reason to be collapse.
Is JAM good for the Polkadot ecosystem and for DOT, the Polkadot token?
I think
69% of the people who watch this podcast have not subscribed. If you enjoy this show, if it provides value to you in one way, shape, or form, can I please ask you a little favor? Can you click that subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment down below? It helps this show more than you can imagine. My goal is to bring the absolute biggest and brightest people on this channel, and the best way to get there is to have all of us rally together and build the When Shift Happens family. Thank you. This conversation is supported by Jupiter, the most used decentralized trading platform on Solana and the largest DAO in the world. Kast card, my go-to card to spend my stablecoins directly with my Apple Pay to buy anything, food, coffee, or plane tickets without having to use a bank ever again. Bitwise Asset Management, the crypto specialist asset manager with more than $10 billion in client assets and more than 30 crypto solutions across ETFs, index funds, alpha strategies, staking, and more. 3. A scalable layer 1 blockchain that's fast, secure, and affordable, built by previous Facebook developers, and that delivers the benefits of Web3 with the ease of Web 2.
Water, you good or you want something else?
water is good.
We have coffee.
Water is good.
Yeah. How are you doing? Ah, a gold card.
Solana gold card, huh?
It's actually the card of a project called Kast. That enables you to spend your stable coins. So it's kind of like a stablecoin bank. Yeah. Very useful. I use it a lot, actually. I mean, I live my life in crypto. Since less long than you, but I live my life in crypto. So this is very helpful. Don't have to go through the off-ramping.
Oh, they do it for you. What's the charge? How much do they take from you?
That's a very good question. So I think they're using the Visa rate. So basically, from what I understood, if you spend USD, it's close to 0. But any other currency, it's 2%. 0.5% for them, 1.5% for Visa, which is pretty expensive. But they have this, like most protocols kind of starting, they have this point system where I think it's about 6 to 10% cashback. So basically, you kind of like save on that, provided that the token, when it launches, keep a valuation that is what they're kind of advertising to calculate the rate.
6 to 10% cashback.
Yeah.
But given in their token.
In the token. Yeah, of course. It would be beautiful to be in cash, but it's given in the token based on a valuation, I think, of the new round that they're raising at, 500 or 600 million valuation. And hopefully the token launches, it does well, and the dollar value stays the same.
Right.
For the cashback.
I mean, this feels like impossible like motion machine. Where does the 6 to 10% cashback come from beyond speculation on the token? Like, what is the token's? I mean, the main point of the token is that they get 0.5% in foreign spends. Is there anything else in the token?
I'm not too sure yet, to be honest, about how the tokenomics. I'm not sure if it's out yet, but I mean, I would say like I would say the product is extremely useful because it's very simple. You just spend, right? You just spend your stablecoins. Done. Nothing else. And so for the moment, I just use it a lot to spend my stablecoins, and then hopefully the token does well. But I would say from something I wrote a couple of days ago was, I don't have a problem paying a fee. You asked before. I mean, 2% is a lot, right? Obviously. And I told the founder, and he says he knows, but it's because Visa gives a certain rate, and it's probably going to get better through time. But if you have something that is really useful and making your life better, you don't mind paying fees, which is the complete opposite of all these protocols incentivizing people with points and farming and all that stuff. Actually, I don't care about the farming a token. I care about if this makes my life so much easier and I don't have to go and off-ramp my stable coins or my crypto, which is such a pain and nightmare, and they ask so many questions, then I'll pay a fee and I'll be happy with it. And I think we don't have enough projects in crypto that make things simpler, where you're just like, I don't care about paying 1 or 2% as long as my life is easier.
It's true. I mean, if it's delivering utility, this is certainly... this can be worth paying for. Although you have to off-ramp still, right? You have to off-ramp to stables.
It's funny, I was talking with Rahul Pal. What are we today? Monday. So last week I was in Dubai and I recorded a conversation with Rahul, and he said, stablecoins? Why? Who has stablecoins? So basically, similar mindset.
I mean, the thing is, they are banks at the end of the day. They'll be... USDC is a bank. USDT is now becoming a bank. Like, they're all just ultra-regulated, centralized banks.
That's very true. I mean, I would argue that's one of the things that makes them more trustworthy for normal people, like not like the very crypto punk mindset, but for sure, it's yeah.
I know plenty of normal people that have had their accounts blocked. It doesn't just affect crypto cypherpunks.
This happened a lot with tech founders too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I know literally normal people that just happen to have, bought a bit of Ether in 2014.
In 2019, which was not 2014, I got banned from Revolut, which now offers crypto, because I was sending too much money to Coinbase, right? From Revolut to Coinbase. And too much money was like £10,000. And it was 2019. So and I'm still banned. I'm banned forever.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, but this is what regulation means. That's the unfortunate thing. And as more and more of crypto, becomes regulated and, sings the right tune while they're doing it, essentially this is the destruction of what crypto stands for. This is just the assimilation of at least part of crypto into the traditional banking establishment.
What's the right balance?
I mean,
if you want mass adoption,
I mean, it depends this is always difficult because it's like, what do the people want? But what I want is less trust, more truth. I don't want to have to rely on arbitrary, opaque, oftentimes whimsical decisions made behind closed doors to affect my life. But that's what regulation means, unfortunately. That's what I've experienced. That's what I've seen others experience, and that's what philosophically it does not protect against. That's what it does. That's what it means. If you trust others, realistically, they will be able to screw you over. And then as much if you don't know these others, and if they have any reason to screw you over, they will screw you over. This was the basis of the Web3 manifesto, right? This is the basis of that document I wrote. It's like one of the first lines. It says, you have to accept that in a world where, we all trust these opaque, arbitrary organizations, individuals, they will screw us over. They will screw you over if they can marginally benefit from that. There's no accountability.
Is there still a world or a possibility where your vision lives?
Again, it depends what people want. And I think as increasing amounts of traditional, like not traditional even, post-war global order crumble, people may very well change their tune and want something that is less based on the trust of institutions that really do not have the best interests at heart.
What happens to you if we get to this world where that's not the one that you envisioned? Are you living?
Am I living? I don't know. Somewhere, I hope.
Are you leaving?
Oh, am I leaving?
Yeah.
I don't know. Look, I mean, a big part of this is, for me, is curiosity, right? Always has been. That's what sort of got me into Ethereum in the first. And I think the curiosity, for me at least, it's still there. But it's, curiosity and satisfying curiosity is very different to leading a project. So I'm not sure if I would say I would lead, if I even do. But I would, but would it mean my curiosity is gone? No, probably not. In my opinion, this is still a very interesting space. My curiosity is not yet satisfied.
Dear When Shift Happens family, the following message is probably the single most important thing you should take away from today's podcast. If you're serious about your crypto investing journey, please take some time to learn how to self-custody your assets to make sure that nobody can take your coins away. Ever. If you don't learn how to be your own bank, it is very likely that one day you will lose all your hard-earned crypto. The safest way to hold your crypto is in a cold storage that we also call hardware wallet. Hardware wallets are not complicated and they give you peace of mind. I personally use a hardware wallet called Trezor. It is open source, very easy to use, and the first hardware wallet created ever. As we like to say it in crypto, not your keys, not your coin. You can order your Trezor wallet with a 10% discount by following the link in the description down below and by using the promo code WSH10. And now, back to the episode.
If you had to explain what it is you do and why you do it to someone who's never heard the words sovereignty or Web3 before, what would you say?
It would be a hard question, and that would be a hard thing to explain. And I would have to sort of, one-liner is less requirement on them to trust other people to live their lives benevolently, and more of an ability for them to see firsthand the aspects that they need in order to live their lives, benevolently. So it's less trust, more truth, right? And I would take that further if I had the time. Don't know if I did, but if I were to have the time and I wanted more of an explanation, then I would really try to help them understand that it's foolish to believe that society is some sort of a free society cannot be one that has arbitrary, unaccountable actors that you have to interact with in order to conduct your life in any meaningful way. That is not a free society. That is simply a form of authoritarianism. And if that is what they think societies, if that is how they expect to live their life, then they must accept that they are living in an authoritarian system. Now, might be that they are happy living in that authoritarian system. Might be. And it might be that over time, their opinion changes as that system becomes more and more arbitrary, less and less reliable, less economically stable or economically viable. But what I think we cannot avoid is that this kind of way of living life is an authoritarian one. It's an authoritarian environment. And I think it's a much better thing to be living in a free society than an authoritarian society.
You're a huge proponent of self-sovereignty. That's exactly what we're talking about. Why? Why do you think that it's much better to live in a free world than an authoritarian world? Because there's probably many other people who first don't even ask themselves the question, or second, actually, because most people don't like to take accountability. So they're like, I'd rather give this power to other people, even if you think about retirement, all these things, right? Most people, I would say, don't take charge.
Sure. I think they're idiots. I think they're fools. I think they are gambling with their own, and to some extent, to the extent that society is governed by the ignorant majority, everyone else's futures. Democracy only works if individuals take note of their surroundings, of their environment, of their way of life, of how they live, and of what their leaders do, of how their government conducts itself. It fails quite fast. We will see, I expect, if people ignore that. And people, I believe, have been ignoring that for quite a long time. I have little time for such people.
What's the moment in your life that made you realize no one is coming for us, or no one is coming for me, and I need to take charge?
I've generally had a pretty, I don't know why, but I've generally had a pretty strong distrust of authorities. Like, I've not generally found authorities have acted, gone out of their way to act in my interest. Though I've had good teachers, you know, and to the extent, and in the Western world, as a kid, teachers are pretty top on the list of authorities. My parents were never particularly like bad to me or anything, but I can't really explain it. I guess it's just, maybe it's an outlook I was largely born with. But I saw no great reason for people I don't know to go out of the way to act in my favor. Why would I? I don't know. I still don't know.
That's a very rational way of thinking, actually.
Therefore, why would I trust a system that implicitly assumes this?
It's funny you mentioned teachers, because that's directly what I thought when I was asking this question. And I also all my life was thinking, like, I don't know, this person is in front of me, they never left school, and yet they're teaching me about business and life stuff, but they don't have any credibility. And I felt that all my life. And then I was thinking, that's why when I discovered Bitcoin, I mean, much later than you, late 2018, and I read the Bitcoin Standard by Safedin Ammous, it just made sense directly, because the reason I started building businesses 10 years ago was I don't trust anything works, right? So you can probably do everything a bit better. And then this Bitcoin Standard book just opened my eyes. It was actually, if you were kind of like, I don't want to say anti-system, but you don't trust any system, when you read that, it makes so much sense. And you're like, I love that. Someone who understands me.
Indeed. I haven't read the book, but I vibe with your conclusions from it.
He explains to more, I would say, less technical people and more normal people like me why Bitcoin makes so much sense, basically. And he explained, I think 80% of the book is not about Bitcoin, it's about the evolution of money. What's hard money, what's sound money, what's unsound money, and why did we go from feather to stones and silver to gold, etc., and why every time it didn't really work, and then why Bitcoin makes sense. So yeah, when I read that, I was like, man, I feel like I'm part of these people. Now I feel like I met some people by reading that who also don't trust anything. What are the most basic requirements that must be met for an individual to become self-sovereign?
I mean, in principle, it is the ability to have control over one's own destiny, right? I would say, I mean, I'm not sure if it's a black and white thing. I think it's more of an attitude. There will be some people that will never be able to reasonably become self-sovereign. I mean, maybe any of us. Just because of the environment they live in. The fact that, you know, they'll be shot if they, like, you're in North Korea and you want to become self-sovereign, good luck. You know. So I think really it's more of an attitude, more of a something that one either aims for or one doesn't. Like Oscar Wilde quote, we're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking to the stars, right? I don't think any of us will truly attain perfect self-sovereignty, but some of us will push to try to get it, especially when there is low-hanging fruit. And there is some low-hanging fruit these days.
For example?
Use crypto. All right? I mean, if you must, use stablecoins. But, like, you know, be aware that this isn't very self-sovereign, right? Probably the rules governing stablecoins are a little bit less arbitrary at the moment than those governing banks. Yeah, you are a bit more, you have a slightly greater credible belief that you will be able to spend your stable coins than you do if you have your money in banks. But I think, you know, it's still not that credible. And I think Bitcoin, fine. Other cryptos, interesting, each with their own merits. I suppose, you know, be aware of those cryptos and any potential like set of authorities that could have arbitrary control over the cryptos that you might not know about. And I mean, there's a lot of centralized cryptos, right? Dino cryptos, decentralized in name only, right? Where it's, you know, holding these cryptos and believing that you have self-sovereignty over some of your economic power is bullshit, right? It's as bullshit as putting your money in a bank and believing the same thing. But I do believe there is still low-hanging fruit. I believe there are cryptos. I mean, Bitcoin is a classic one, right? Where it's like, yeah, there's a protocol that specifies a fixed maximum supply. You have a pretty reasonable idea over the wealth distribution within it, in that there probably isn't a founder that, you know, an active founder that holds vast quantities of it. What else can you do? I guess move to a country that, you know, respects sovereign rights as best as possible, as well as possible, or start your own fucking country. You know, find a militia that want to uphold rule of law, come up with some rule of law that makes sense for you and the people that you want to live around, and find some land and go for it. I mean, you know, it's an age-old idea, particularly in crypto, but I think there is some increased appetite for this that I see these days. I see like free cities ideas popping up all over the place. America particularly has a few of these projects now in various degrees of development. And we see a little bit of this also in other places in the world, especially those that are not that free in and of themselves. Dubai springs to mind, where you've got like, you know, sort of a bit of a hybrid system going on where foreigners have some, the government has set up kind of some support desks for foreigners that are having trouble with maybe arbitrary decisions being made that they feel are unfair, or just, you know, incompetent operatives and within the civil service or whatever, you know. So I think there is some desire for this, and I don't think self-sovereignty has much. Like, self-sovereignty is about escaping arbitrariness. It's not about living outside of rules, right? There are rules that we have to live within, rules of physics, right? Rules of economics. Like these are non-negotiable largely. I mean, in crypto, you can try and run away from the rules of economics for a while, but they will catch up to you eventually. Terra Luna will happen to you eventually, right? If your tokenomics are not sustainable. Cryptography, right? Up more rules. Maths, right? There are rules that you're going to be required to live by. Self-sovereignty doesn't mean having no rules. It means knowing what those rules are, understanding them, and not being placed under an arbiter that you don't know, right? Not being placed under arbitrary decisions, not being placed under whimsical authorities. That's a big difference.
You mentioned a bunch of individuals who are pushing for that. You and your friend Ed Hess are part of a group of 50 to 60 founders who gather every year to ideate on sovereignty. I think in Patagonia. What's one of the wildest or most exciting ideas that has emerged from those gatherings?
I can't really say. My memory is quite foggy from the gatherings, but I think on the face of it, the ideas are pretty sort of sensible. They make sense to me anyway. I think the nation states that I'm most familiar with are based on nonsense aggregated over, if not many decades, centuries. Oftentimes based on a lot of arbitrary behavior by individuals or organizations of individuals, religion in some cases, with a lot of fossilized laws that make no sense but are still on the law books and occasionally enforced if the whim of the present government decides. I think there needs to be a dramatic rethink of the social contract in this modern age. An age becoming ever more distant from the society that most of these laws were created for. The internet, media, like TV, changed it dramatically. Mm-hmm. The internet changed it further dramatically. AI continues to change it further dramatically. And, we are living one's life in society today, particularly Western society, is almost unrecognizable, I would say, from living one's life in Western society, in my grandmother's grandfather's time. Almost unrecognizable. And yet, somehow, it's still, I think, to some extent anyway, people's expectations that the laws should remain, or the social contract should remain more or less the same. I don't see this. And I think this is the basis of those discussions that we have, right, in Patagonia. It's like, can we rethink the social contract to something that is relevant, given what technology is now around?
You mentioned before, start your own country. Mm. What's your thoughts on the work of Balaji Srinivasan regarding the network states?
I wasn't aware of work. I know the book. I don't know if he's doing much specifically in order to make the book or more of a reality than it's already being made. I think the concept is a interesting one. I don't know. I know it in passing. So I wouldn't want to go into. I couldn't discuss it in detail. But from what discussions I've had around the concept, I'm kind of ambivalent. I think it's kind of sensible. We have the internet. We have increasingly self-sovereign systems on the internet. Systems that transcend national, international sovereignty. Mm. At the end of the day, a large amount of sovereignty can only be secured by physical security, physical means, territory, in a word. Like, there is even one of the, I would argue, I don't know if this is Balaji's, one of his examples, but I would argue like the Catholic Church as an obvious example of a network state. An old one. But even the Catholic Church felt the need to have a bit of territory, right? Not very much. And certainly not very many compared to the number of citizens it has in its sort of network state. I think this is sensible. And I think if we do hope to create sort of network states that go beyond what we kind of have at the moment, which is DAOs and crypto, then we need to sort of get real on the idea of having a territory which upholds the rules that the members of the network state wish to hold themselves to.
So you would still qualify Solana, Ethereum, Polkadot as sort of network states?
Well, I don't know. I didn't invent the term, so I'm not sure if they do under that under what the book and the sort of the requirements set out in the book. But for me, and this might be apocryphal, if that's the word I mean, I would say that a network state can start with as little as a crypto. Like I think it's only a very weak network state, but the fact that Bitcoin introduces rules for those who sort of opt into Bitcoin to follow and respect, and the fact that if you disregard the rules, for example, by hacking your client to make it show more money than you really have, then you are in effect excommunicating yourself from Bitcoin, because a hacked client will not synchronize with the network. So it's a very weak network state, but it is, I would say, in my mind, it passes that lowest threshold. And then as we get more and more sophisticated means or sophisticated rule systems and sophisticated means even of adapting those rule systems over time, the concept of membership, like explicit membership, then we sort of flesh out more and more of the organs of this sort of network state, create a more sophisticated network state. But ultimately, in my mind, it's still like it doesn't necessarily have to be a state that literally everyone in the network state lives. Like this I say is not important. This is probably a key difference between a sort of network state and a regular state. But I would still say that people want to live I want to live somewhere that I feel I belong, right? And how do I end? There's a few things that make me feel I belong somewhere, and one of them's to do with food and drink, and others to do with language, and others to do with friends, where my friends and family are. But one of the big things, I would say, for me at least, and I suspect for other people, is the overall social contract that you're taking part in, like the rules of society, both those that are written down and those that are just part of unwritten expectations that you have of other people and that other people have of you. And I think it's a very strong thing, a strong desire, a strong driver to want to belong somewhere. And you can't really do this, at least not in the physical sense, which I would argue is like most of it, if there is no territory for you to potentially go.
Let's remove maybe the state part and talk about networks, crypto networks. How do we overcome, because you mentioned before, you said the goal is freedom, but we're getting with all this regulation into a world where there's probably less and less of that. And probably one of the ways where we can potentially still get there is having these different networks work together instead of competing with each other. The current problem we have today is that there's competition between Solana, Polkadot, Ethereum. They're competing for the same users, the same liquidity, the same developers. How do we overcome that to get to the next level where these networks work with one another to grow the pie?
This is very, very hard. This is a hard problem. So, in principle, I believe it's solvable, but the inertia to get to the solution is immense, because we have turned what should be a technical solution, what would be ideally a technical solution, into, I don't know, like a football league, with everyone having their own team colours and some people ready to, tooth and nail fight with the other team after the match and this is not a conducive environment for working together and trying to enlarge the pie for everyone. What are we left with? Possibilities, consolidation, hard to imagine in crypto. Founders trying to somehow come together. Again, kind of hard to imagine. Founders are under immense pressure to perform according to, their protocol's adherence. Anything that looks like they're collaborating, quote unquote, with the enemy could be construed as weakness.
Is there anything like that happening now? Some potential collaboration behind the scenes?
Not behind the scenes, only what you see, right? So there are projects that are tacitly using other projects' technologies. Mm. It's not all bad vibes, but it nonetheless is very hard. Mm. It's very, very hard. Especially when it calls the token's own sovereignty into question. Essentially, we have these different football teams. And who's ever heard of a football team merger? I mean, I haven't. Have you? I don't think it exists.
Not yet.
Right? Technically speaking, like in terms of technology, I think it's a solvable problem. The way I would solve it is separate the network from the token and have both tokens be, or have all tokens that reside on the network be capable of being used for all things. So the tokens retain their individual identity and potentially even some of their tokenomics. Yet they are to a large extent fungible at a floating market rate. This is sort of not unlike how existing currencies work for nation states. The main difference is that they would be people would be free to sort of move around the different nation states frictionlessly and take their basket of currencies with them and have everything just be sort of automatically switched according to what makes most sense when they actually need to spend. And I am vaguely, thinking about this. This is an interesting problem to me. Seems to me that a very hard one. And this has direct relevance for Polkadot. I mean, at the moment there are, two distinct currencies within the Polkadot ecosystem, Polkadot and Kusama, right? Separate networks, separate currencies. And it would be cool for these to be more closely aligned. Like it would be cool if they were not in principle sort of competing currencies. And it would be, I think, a really good demonstration of this. And, if I think that it's very interesting to imagine, I get asked this a lot, right? I get asked, there's a new protocol JAM. Are you going to have a new currency, right? And the answer, of course, is like, no, it's a protocol upgrade for Polkadot. But it does make me think. It's like, is this something people want? Why are they asking? Are they wanting a yes to this?
I have a question linked to that later, obviously.
So my feeling is, before I consider that too deeply, I would want to have a plan for how multiple different L1, if you want, base layer currencies would cooperate with each other and not just become inevitable competitors, right? Different football teams. And this is, this is something that's, on the back of my mind. I think about it sometimes.
We talked about networks, network states, nation states, and the key to a network or an organization to function or dysfunction is obviously governance. Blockchain governance today is often opaque, even in giants like Ethereum. What's the root problem? and how can we fix it?
So governance is an interesting one. What is governance? It's essentially how a system, or the mechanism by which a system evolves over time, how a system can change itself over time, right? You don't need governance if the system is never expected to change. Yeah, so Bitcoin, there are some in the Bitcoin ecosystem that argue Bitcoin needs no governance because what Satoshi Nakamoto introduced those years ago was perfect. He wrote a paper on it. It's perfect paper. It doesn't need to be changed. It is what it is. Let it be. Now, I don't think that anything any human produces is perfect. And therefore, I think everything should probably, if we want it to be successful in the long run, provide some means for it to evolve. I mean, there are some things that come close to perfection, right? The mocha, coffee thing from Italy. This is pretty classic design, right?
What else?
The Eames lounge chair, very good, classic design, right? There's a few things that have really hit this local optimum, but not many. And you've got to be pretty fucking self-centered to think that you have managed to create something that is at this local optimum. I'm not, and therefore I think it's best to play on the safe side and make something that can actually evolve over time, be flexible. So then we have to create governance, which is, a whole crazy bag of worms that is difficult to do well, I would say. It's an unsolved problem. It's an unsolved problem in human society, has been unsolved for many times, for many millennia. How do we manage it? Well, at least with Polkadot, it's like, let's try and codify how the system should decide to evolve over time and autonomously enforce that. And this is the Polkadot. I mean, it's called various things, OpenGov, the Polkadot DAO, but this is the basis of Polkadot's governance, and it's why Polkadot has governance, really. I mean, there's a few other things like having a treasury and so forth, but by far the most important thing is controlling how the Polkadot protocol evolves over time, how the Polkadot network, I should really say, evolves over the time, and ensuring that it can evolve autonomously. I would say this is an opinionated decision. I think it's a good one, but it is opinionated, and there are those in other ecosystems that think differently. I had a chat with Vitalik, met several years ago now, before Polkadot launched. We talked a bit about this. I think it was in Singapore on a local forum, a local panel. And the opinion presented to me was that governance shouldn't be on chain. It should be behind sort of closed doors and pretty arbitrary and rough consensus and all of these woolly phrases and words.
That was his view.
Mm-hmm. That was the view that he presented to me. I mean, this is going back 7 years, so I wouldn't want to represent it as his view now. But and this didn't make sense to me. In my mind, we have a rules-based system. Now, we might not know the optimum means of deciding what those new rules should be. But at least if we codify them, there's a sort of default that we can measure and experiment with. We can't do that if we don't codify them. We will only get to some sensible endpoint if we make the first step. If we start by trying to codify how the rules should alter over time, and we can't just, ignore the problem. The problem exists, whether we like it or not. And centralizing this and putting it under a very opaque, sort of closed framework, and pretending that it's got a name, pretending that it's got a name and a theory behind it, I don't buy this at all. And I even reference this quite strongly in the Fellowship Manifesto, this idea of like papal governance, where there's the sort of unelected pope, or non-popularly elected pope, that's, basically decrees things, but does so largely with, listening to their cardinals. I think at the moment it doesn't matter so much, but I think in the future it might matter a lot.
Do you think a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, can truly work?
Truly, I mean, that's a hard one because it depends how you define work, but can it work as well as the best alternative that we have? Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely.
Why?
Because the best alternative that we have is just a crappy DAO. It's just a vague DAO, right? It's a DAO that can break, that can be corrupted, that can disregard its own rules quite easily. Well, yeah, that's a crappy DAO. A DAO is just a rules-based system, a rules-based collective. So there's a bunch of individuals. They hold themselves to some rules, some laws of interaction, and how they'll decide to administer presumably some collective resources, or some collective privilege. There are all sorts of different sort of human structures that we've evolved over time, whether it's, small company, corporate, militaristic, government style. Like there's a lot of different types of these things, but at the end of the day, they're all just rules-based systems. And they're with varying degrees of adherence to those rules. And usually these rules-based systems break if, over time, if those rules are not adhered to, right? That's usually the risk. The risk is not that the rules are bad. Like the rules are the things that have evolved over decades or centuries in order to be good. The thing that's bad is that people don't fucking actually honor the rules. Now, this is not entirely the full story. Of course, if you go to places like Germany, they honor the rules a lot as part of the culture. Very strong culture of honoring rules. But oftentimes the rules are suboptimal. And so you end up with, people honoring rules that are not sensible. But there are excellent examples of countries that have the same rule honoring, but also have optimized rules. Like actually the rules change according to the circumstances of the world, according to new technologies, right? Switzerland is a good example of this, right? And I think that's largely because Switzerland is a much more heavily decentralized country. Therefore, it's a lot easier for the people that the rules affect to go through the feedback loop and change the rules than it is in a much larger, a more centralized country where the effective levels of accountability are much greater, and that feedback loop is much more remote, much longer. The rules don't change so much, if at all, and you end up with people that still honor the rules, but they're just dumb rules. Still, if we assume that, I think we can, that systems can evolve over time, those rules-based systems evolve over time intentionally, like they do in, sensible places, then it's what we really want is a way that we can ensure that all of the various components of the machine, of the human machine, follow the rules, right? And that's basically just what DAOs give us. They remove the arbitrary nature, the authoritarian nature that our kind of half-assed rules-based systems have in the real world. So no, I absolutely I absolutely believe DAOs are just a better version of existing human organizations in exactly the same way that I believe that, cryptocurrencies are, to a large extent, just a better version of existing human currencies.
I've been thinking about the Swiss example quite a lot because I'm Swiss. And it works. And I've been thinking, why does it work? And I feel like it's because Swiss people in the culture are very reasonable. But I don't feel like a lot of people in this world are very reasonable. There was an example once many years ago where Swiss people were voting whether to have 6 weeks of holidays per year instead of 5, right? And then Swiss people voted against that. And then the French people would come and say, what's wrong with you guys, right? And you can see it's because they're very reasonable and they understand the consequences of like long-term decision making, right? Which for me as a Swiss person, I'm still always like, even in that specific case, I was really impressed. I'm thinking like these people I don't really know how it's working, but it's probably just because people are very reasonable, right?
But I think it's not just that. I think it's also that people take they have a stake in society. So they're able to think on both sides, both their individual advantages to this, which, presumably you would, on the individual side, you would want the 6 weeks. But also on the social side to this. And on the social side, maybe 5 weeks is better because, there's a lot of, people will do more work and it'll be more, internationally competitive and the economy will be better. And, I think you have to have stake in the society, a sort of true belief of shared fate for you to make sensible decisions. And you know what? We do this in Polkadot. We have this concept of conviction voting that means people who are more locked in to the repercussions of their decision have a greater voice. And I think this is crucial. I think one of the big things that's missing from a lot of democracies beyond, this short feedback loop, so basically localism, is a very indifferent attitude towards wider society, right? It's like people don't really want to look after their country anymore, their society anymore. And I think because they no longer identify with it to a large extent.
Probably because most don't work. It's probably easier to identify to your own country when you realize, hey, it's working, or at least it's working better than the other ones, than if you feel like you're getting screwed by taxes or there's no safety or you're basically struggling every day.
Yep. The social contract is really crumbling in many Western societies. And I think this is a big problem with if you expect democracy to work, you got to uphold the social contract. You don't uphold the social contract, democracy ain't going to work anymore.
Behind every organization, even if it's decentralized, there are humans. At the end of the day, humans are greedy, self-interested. Most think short-term, and some are corrupt. How do you prevent a DAO from becoming corrupted and infested with short-term thinkers that could work with each other in a manner that ruins the overall long-term goals of the organization?
I mean, this is basic game theory, right? In essence, you design the game in order to utilize what you know about the players, what you know about the participants, to achieve what it is that you want the system to be. So to achieve the system goals. Now, this is a difficult problem, but it's one that game theorists tackle routinely. We know that players are, selfish, greedy, right? Oftentimes thinking on a very limited time horizon. And so we design games, we design the rules of the system to take advantage of those things that we know or that we believe, right? And as I said, one of the very simple examples of how Polkadot does this with its governance is it introduces a concept of conviction voting, which weights votes according to how long the participant is locking themselves into the repercussions for. The longer you lock yourself into the system, the more voting weight you get. So it's not really a democracy, right? It's not even really corporate governance.
In that case, is it staking? How long you've been staking your token for? Or what's the concrete example of how you...
It's literally the lock. So you place a lock on your own tokens such that they cannot be moved to any other address, can't be sold, for a particular period of time. So like, you know, it can be up to like, I don't know, a year and a half or 2 years or something. And if you go for the maximum limit, then you get 5 times as many votes, 6 times, I can't remember exactly, as if you do it just for, I think, a month or a week, depending on which network you're on, because Sama is different to Polkadot. And if you don't want to lock your tokens at all, you still get a voice, but it's a very small, it's like a tenth of what you get if you lock your tokens up for the minimum period. So it's really about, you have to understand the participants and that what drives the participants, absolutely. And what drives the participants can be totally different to what it is that you want to achieve from the system. But by setting the rules cleverly, you can use that. It's kind of like the wind, you know, it's like sailing. Yeah, the wind might not be blowing in the direction you want the boat to go, but by being very clever with how you position the sail, you can take the energy from the wind and go in whatever direction you want. Yeah, you might not go as fast as the wind is blowing, but you will still always go in the direction that you want to go, right? And it's, you know, to use this, you have the, what's the effect called? I forget now, but it's the same one that wings and planes use. Bernoulli.
Bernoulli, yeah. Bernoulli principle, yeah.
A Bernoulli principle. You know, and in game theory, we have, you know, various other principles that we can utilize in order to take the wind of, you know, human decision-making, like individual human decision-making, and turn it into the motion of a stable, well-aligned, long-term system.
On the governance side, would you say that Polkadot is a success?
It's mixed. It's a mixed success. I would say it's not I would not say it's a failure. I would say it's, and some excellent data was collected in order to understand the limitations of the present design for OpenGov and to understand how we might alter that design in order to get to improved decision making. But it's always going to be, we must always compare it to the alternatives. And I don't believe there is a better alternative yet. I mean, I haven't done a literature review of all current governance systems in crypto and real life, but from what I know, there is no better governance system that achieves the goals that we need to achieve. One of which, of course, is that it's not centralized, that it's not based around a single organization or leadership.
Without strong governance, decentralized system collapse into chaos. If you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about how Polkadot works today, what would it be?
I would make it entirely shielded.
What does that mean?
Stick everything in ZK. So make everything totally anonymous. At the moment, Polkadot is entirely open. Like when I vote, I do so with my account, like the account that has all my funds in. It's easy enough for people to track, you know, exactly what any particular individual is doing, especially, you know, as they just look at the different accounts and sort of see what that account is doing and the various different things. This is not. This has repercussions. This has repercussions which affect the game theory in difficult to predict ways, and that's unfortunate. When we vote in a democracy in the Western world, we vote anonymously. This is crucial. We don't do that in Polkadot. That's a problem. It's a difficult problem to fix because Polkadot's governance is quite sophisticated and quite particular. And the more sophisticated a particular logical systems get in ZK, the harder it is to generate and verify proofs. But nonetheless, as a long-term goal, I think it's a reasonable one. And maybe it's something that we'll see collaboration with some other projects on.
I understand the logic of being anonymous and the advantages, but there is also advantages of being transparent. For example, people know what people are doing versus, I would argue, maybe it's too naive, but I would argue if it's fully anonymous, people can come together. People with a lot of weight can come together without other people knowing it. And it's not really decentralized anymore, but people don't know it because it's anonymous.
Yeah. So I think I see what you're saying. If I understand correctly, you are asserting that there may be particular individuals in a system that control a large amount of, or wield a heavy influence. And it is what you would like, or what you think is good for the system, is if it is known which individuals have heavy influence over the decision making. And the reality is that no system provides this. No system. Western democracies don't provide this because it's impossible to measure. Beyond polling, beyond the vote itself, it's impossible to measure who has influence in any given time, right? There was once upon a time we could maybe look at newspaper readership numbers and have a bit of a guess as to which, or news channels or political shows, but really, it's very difficult to measure in any accurate fashion. It's not possible to measure generally in crypto, not because the systems are shielded, not because they're behind ZK, got very little to do with that, just because they're pseudonymous. No one knows if there is a single person in Ethereum that, in the crowd sale maybe had a few million to spare and decided to buy up 50% of that crowd sale ETH and now controls vast amounts of this multi-$100 billion economy. It's impossible to say, but it's not unrealistic, right? There were definite Bitcoin millionaires in 2014 close to the Ethereum project. It's not unrealistic at all. ZK doesn't help it. They don't need ZK. Yeah. But ZK does help the lesser, the sort of smaller participants, and it does help certain apparatus of governance. For example, fellowship governance, right? The technical fellowship. Without ZK, it's possible to see who votes for an upgrade and who doesn't. And these are verified identities. And if the upgrade ultimately turns out to fall foul of a particular nation state, they could go after the individuals that voted. Yeah. Now, in theory, they might go after all of the individuals who could vote if it's under ZK, but this quickly becomes a yak shaving exercise as we increase the number of individuals that get some sort of say, it makes it a lot harder for this attack to happen. Now, I'm not necessarily against introducing rules that would identify individuals and attach, say, a quadratic multiplier to their voting weight, thereby reducing the possibility of individuals influencing an outcome too much. Now, this is something that a community would have to agree upon, right? Well, how much is too much? And should it be quadratic weighted at all, or should it just be a requirement to disclose, right? I don't think it's helpful to, in any voting, to identify the individuals. I think this is not helpful. I think it can be helpful to identify that there are individuals with substantial influence over the outcome and potentially reduce that influence. Potentially. Not sure around that. This is only going to be possible with proof of personhood, right? So you first have to have some sort of sensible Web3 proof of personhood before you can embark on this. Just using account identifiers is quite easy to work around with a bit of scripting knowledge. And once you have proof of personhood, I think the solution is pretty easy. And it's just about finding an agreement between the participants in the system.
We talked about a few hard problems. What's one of the absolute hardest problems that every network founder faces?
I don't know. There's a few. Polkadot always played it very sort of safe with regulations and regulatory authorities, opting to listen to them while they made, while they were clear about what it was that they wanted, and having a rich discourse when it maybe wasn't so clear, and trying to find a path forward sort of together. Of course, that was in the old days. Everything's a little bit different now. So I think there is that, and I think other founders maybe. I think I'm a very different personality to many other founders. I think if I had gone down the same route that they had gone down, I would not get nearly as good a sleep as I do.
You sleep well?
Yeah, pretty well. I've got a 1.5-year-old, so not always super well, but that has little to do with regulatory authorities. Another one, of course, is trying to please everyone. And there are a lot of different people with different desires. And sometimes, oftentimes, you have to decide who it is that you're going to please and who it is that you're not going to please. And sometimes, insofar as these network founders retain substantial leadership, you have to be quite clear about what the mission is and what the mission isn't. Like, what are the goals? What are the non-goals? And I think this can be very difficult. This can be very difficult because that there are some people that not much gonna like what it is that you have to say. But if it is the way that it is.
I was on the plane coming here and I saw it was in Emirates and there was a documentary on Vitalik. You're actually in there. And it talks about the beginning of Ethereum and this moment of, do we do non-for-profit or do we build a company, right? And the arguments, and that's probably one of these big things where there's this massive disconnect between the people who are involved. And at some point, there's a decision being made that's not going to make everyone happy, obviously. I recently talked to Anatoly Yakovenko, the founder of Solana, on this podcast. He told me, I suck at management. I hate managing people. How much do you relate to this?
100%, 110%. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I've got a great couple of great teams around me that I work with, daily. For the two sort of projects that I'm involved with, JAM and Proof of Personhood. But the wider, I mean, this isn't really I don't view this as management, and I'm not really even managing them. In both cases, there is sort of someone else that looks after the sort of day to day. I just do work. I'm just someone who is productive. I find that it is a really hard problem, and I never really understood management. I really haven't. I guess I still don't. I'm lost. I'm lost in management. I know what I like, right? I know what I want to achieve myself, and insofar as I find people that share a passion for doing that, then I work well with them. But I think that's not what management's about. And I'm happy to let others who are obviously have a better grasp of this than I do that task.
You created a fellowship for Polkadot's development after your departure. Why do you think about your departure from Polkadot?
Well, I mean, my departure was from CEO of Parity. And the reason that I stepped down as CEO of Parity was in part because of that last question. And it was in part so I could do more work with Polkadot. Creating the fellowship gave me a clear, role within Polkadot that meant I could, in some sense, transition from CEO of Parity to, grand architect of Polkadot, like into the DAO. And this was very good. I liked this. This was, bit of dog fooding, but very good. Very good for me, and I think also good for Polkadot.
How do you measure good for Polkadot? I mean, how do you measure good for me and good for Polkadot?
Well, good for me in that I felt that I was doing something that I was capable of, that I was creating value. Good for Polkadot meant that simply that Parity could. So Parity is a key force within the Polkadot ecosystem. Polkadot is stronger if there is no such. I mean, a key force, also double-sided sword. It's also a key risk. Polkadot is stronger without key risks. And the more that I was, by being CEO of Parity, I was in essence enforcing and buttressing this key risk. And by moving away from Parity, being one of several moved away from Parity, but into Polkadot, into the DAO, I believe it gave Polkadot a better manifestation of itself rather than have Polkadot, in essence, use parity as its manifestation, or accidentally use parity as its manifestation. So I think this is better for Polkadot. Now, whether it's better for parity is a different question. Maybe, maybe not. But for me and Polkadot, I think it was.
How do you personally handle the tension created between your vision for Polkadot and the decisions of a decentralized governance? The moment you leave and you're not the CEO anymore, things might not always go the way that you envisioned. How do you deal with that?
Well, I'm not the CEO of Polkadot as it stands. And not being the CEO of Parity shouldn't make any difference, right?
In theory.
Parity doesn't exert. Parity has a limited influence over Polkadot's direction. Substantial, but limited. And it's quantifiable. Right? OpenGov. Through OpenGov, you can quantify precisely how much influence Parity has. It is not an authority over Polkadot. And with JAM, that will be underlined. There will be many different technical teams that are all capable of upholding the JAM network. Parity will be one of many. As for OpenGov, yeah, there are sometimes decisions it makes that I think are not particularly sensible. But I mean, where I have a strong opinion, I usually vote. And a lot of the time I accept that I don't have that much. I mean, certainly I have in the past accepted that I don't have that much of a clue over, promotion, how to promote a cryptocurrency. Like I don't know how to do this. I'm not an expert in crypto promotion. Yeah, I never have been, and I hope I will never have to be. It is just not something that I find I want to do or be. Insofar as it coincides with teaching and musing and being curious and researching, I'm happy to do stuff that results in a similar effect to, promotion. But promoting for promotion's sake, no. And there are a lot of the, at least more tenuous, controversial spends on OpenGov centered around promotion. And there are other things that are centered around team management. It's like there is a team that wants to do X, Y, and Z, and they want, some money for doing that. And again, I'm not a manager. I don't really want to be a manager. And you know what? I'm not the only person that has a stake in Polkadot, so I'm happy to sit some of these decisions out. And if people are upset at that, then they probably need to go to a more authoritarian protocol. Because I refuse to be the authority that sits in the background or even the foreground and makes all of these fucking decisions. It's not my job. I am one of many.
Bitcoin has Satoshi. Ethereum has Vitalik. Solana has Anatoly. One way or another, whether you like it or not, Polkadot has Gavin. You said, I had some help from your friend Ed on this one. You said networks should not have charismatic founders. I want to challenge that. How can a network rise to the top and stay at the top without not only a charismatic leader, but also a cult leader?
Hey, I mean, you don't have to bet. I think there's clear examples of non-charismatic leaders at the top, right? Bitcoin doesn't have a charismatic leader.
But it's still a cult.
Ah, okay. That's different.
For me, cult is even higher than... So there is the charisma and then there is the cult, which is like even stronger.
I think I think Satoshi Nakamoto, as an example, demonstrates it's possible to be a cult leader without, or even a cult figure without being in any way charismatic.
But I think this can be reproduced.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to name any names because that's a bit harsh. But I see some other examples in crypto that have non-charismatic leaders that have somehow managed to attain a bit of a cult following. And I would say quite honestly that Satoshi Nakamoto it doesn't even really come into leadership, right? A proposal was put forward, the Bitcoin white paper and some source code. And then he bowed out. That's not really leadership, right? It's yeah, maybe people wrote some comic books about him, and there's a bit of a sort of cult thing. But it's I don't see that many. I think people follow Satoshi Nakamoto and respect him as a cult figure only in so much as they respect Bitcoin. It's just a vehicle for that. Now, if people want to respect Polkadot by respecting Gavin Wood, fine. I don't really care. I mean, I care if they start, kneeling at me in conferences or whatever. But like, that's too weird. But as long as it's like, polite and doesn't make me feel uncomfortable, then it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I honestly think that if a protocol is about the leader, not about the protocol itself, like if people follow a protocol because of the leader, not the protocol itself, we're back into football team territory. And this, in my opinion, is the biggest thing that will prevent crypto to peacefully consolidate into something sensible. Yeah. There'll just be fights. Like if the charismatic leaders create, in essence, competing
echo chambers.
Echo chambers in that they kind of, I look upon systems as kind of biological cells, like social systems. I find it's often quite helpful to sort of see analogs in biology. And social systems will tend to create what I kind of call a sort of social cell wall, right? It's kind of like you're in or you're out. And then there will be some kind of means of making decisions, oftentimes authoritarian, right? The thing that guides, this is the sort of DNA of the cell. And we have in crypto an accidental cell wall, which is the currency, the token, right? It's like if you hold it, you're in. If you don't, you're out. And people hold themselves to this. They don't want to support a crypto that they don't hold. If for some reason they don't hold it, they automatically don't support it. If they do hold it, they automatically do support it, right? They don't have to think about it, which is kind of sad, because this is arbitrary. This isn't rational decision making. This is arbitrary decision making. And insofar as they look toward a leader within this sort of cell, this social cell, to make the decisions, we haven't really progressed beyond what we had before Bitcoin, right? Arbitrary leadership and blind sheep following them. Well, that's not what I want to. I don't want people, putting my using my picture to represent this particularly. I don't think this is sensible. I don't think this is. So to the extent that I can fight for, look at the protocol, not the founder of the protocol, I will. I don't want to be that leader. I see tech leaders out there that obviously do. Well, that's not me.
How do you envision Polkadot evolving without you?
OpenGov, the fellowship. And what would it do? I don't know. And in some sense, I don't like, it's not that I don't care. I kind of do care that it makes good decisions without me, but I wouldn't sort of prejudice it by saying what it is that I think those decisions should be. And to some extent, I don't know what they should be. It's not like I have a big, long list of everything Polkadot should do and be in my head. I don't. A lot of things I have to sort of decide based on the changing environment, and that's as it should be. Like Polkadot was always meant to be flexible and adaptive because it doesn't have a founder that believes their imagination and vision is perfect and all-encompassing and accurate and precise and comprehensive, right? And any founder that says that they do is probably bullshitting or delusional. Yeah. So it should be adaptive, and I don't know what it should adapt because, firstly, I don't have all questions answered, and secondly, I don't know the future, and it will inevitably have to adapt to some changing environments. One of the big changes was the alteration in the US not regime. Administration. And this had a pretty dramatic effect on crypto. And certainly people's attitudes, I think, towards crypto. We saw a sort of similar sea change when China brought in controls against crypto. And a large part of the crypto market was kind of, if not locked out, certainly put off. And we'll no doubt see changes in the coming years that will alter the environment crypto lives in and lives under. And crypto will have to, there will be winners and losers, but one thing we can definitely say is that those that are capable of sensibly and rationally changing their course in these changing times are much less likely to be losers than those who cannot. There will be some accidental winners for sure. If we want to maximize the chances of not being a loser, then we have to be adaptive. And we have to be, to some extent, rationally adaptive as well.
Does that mean that Bitcoin is at risk? If the sole purpose of Bitcoin is to not change?
Long term, yes.
What's long term?
Difficult to say. And we must remember that for a currency, like banking, like gold, a huge part of it is its pre-existing acceptance and assumption by at least the rich parts of the population. So insofar as Bitcoin has achieved that over other protocols, over other currencies, it's not at risk. And as long as it can defend that place in people's minds, it's not at risk. But that's a very special spot, right? Default currency, right? There cannot be that many default currencies. One that, gold to some extent achieved. And even gold, we must remember, now it looks, pretty sensible to be holding, right? It's gone up a decent amount in the last year or so. But there was a time not that long ago where everyone was like, oh, gold. So it's old news. It's gone. It's had its day, right? We've moved beyond gold.
Yeah. For like the 2010, 2020.
Precisely. Yeah. Brown's bottom.
Yeah.
And I think we are slowly moving beyond banks in our minds, in our collective minds, as being the places that are most trusted to store our wealth or administer our wealth. But it is look after our wealth. I think slowly this is changing. When I think, at least for myself, where would I want my wealth to be if, widespread conflict breaks out in the world? And there was once upon a time Switzerland would be an answer on many people's lips. This to some extent, I think, is again a little bit of passé. particularly since Switzerland gave up a lot of its sovereignty to the, sort of Western coalition of whatever the post-war financial order, international order states, America being the leader of it, but also Europe seems very keen on preserving this, and in doing so, sort of got rid of its anonymity laws, right? Got rid of a lot of its privacy laws, punched a hole in them, and I think these days, I wouldn't want to move away entirely from banks as someone with a bit of wealth, but I don't think I would want to put all of it in banks by a long stretch. And I think if that's, maybe I'm a bit of a trailblazer on this, but I think I'd be surprised if this is not a relatively widespread belief that comes in over the next generation or so. And I think it's the same concept as gold, right? It's like there is a feel like there's a reason people like the idea of having a bar of gold under the bed. It's like, it's something that, to some extent they can count on, they can trust. It's not even trust, right? It's like, or if it is trust, it's a very, very, very diffuse trust. Because there isn't a human organization that in principle has control over their assets now. The gold is there, it's under the bed, and they have a strong, rational, credible belief that it is exchangeable for goods and services across the world in and of itself. And to the extent that cryptocurrency can sort of be digital gold, I think we are, as a human, starting to move beyond banks.
You mentioned Switzerland, Swiss banks before, and some people in the last few years have been saying that Bitcoin is a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And I think this makes more and more, as you say, sense to new generation. I definitely feel like that. And I feel like the new generations is going to become very, very logical for them. Like, I don't see how it doesn't.
I agree. I think we're getting there. The question in my mind is, to what extent. There's a lot of different points on the spectrum, right? There is the stablecoins at one end, right, where it's basically a bank. It's just that your bank account is administered on chain, but it's still the bank that holds your money. They can arbitrarily block your account, right? It's still an arbitrary authority that's in principle in charge of your wealth. Versus on the other end, I don't know, I guess Bitcoin maybe is probably the best example of something that is least likely to arbitrarily change, because there's a lot of inertia behind the protocol, and there is also the most amount of time it's been around for and not changed significantly. Like that it's stabilized, it's matured. And where you fall on this spectrum, I don't know. Like, I don't know where the next generation will zero in at. And maybe they'll just go into meme coins or some other bullshit. I don't know.
You mentioned before, you said, I don't want to be marketing a coin.
Promoting. So I have a question on tech versus marketing. Okay.
The VHS versus Betamax war was a key moment in consumer electronic history.
Not the first time I've had this brought up to me.
I had some help here from your dear friend.
Oh, yes.
And this story resulted in VHS dominance despite Betamax initially being the superior technology.
Yeah.
Betamax, developed by Sony, offered better video and audio quality, but VHS, released by JVC, was ultimately favored for its longer recording time, lower production costs, and wider adoption by film studios and rental stores. Overall, VHS had an inferior technology, but won due to better marketing and distribution. One of your core beliefs is that the best tech must win. Is it possible that the best tech does not win in crypto?
No.
And why? Why?
I will. This example. So, firstly, there's a couple of holes in it. The first hole is it wasn't necessarily the better technology. It might have been a more sophisticated technology, but there were legitimate advantages to using VHS. As you said, longer recording time and cheaper production costs. These are legitimate advantages. These are things that technology, good technology, should provide. Yet for Betamax, they didn't provide that, right? Their technology may have been more sophisticated, but it didn't help the product achieve what was needed to be achieved. Now, I don't think that better technology equals more sophisticated technology. So that's the first thing. The second thing is VHS fell to DVD. DVD was obviously the better technology, right? It's not that, oh, so many people are using VHS now. We'll never change from VHS. No. People upgraded. They just upgraded once it was clear that the upgrade difference was enough. A time came when the technology, was better enough that the upgrade made sense. And I mean, this is the case for computers, but on a much smaller timescale, right? So people upgraded from an 8-bit computer, like a Sinclair Spectrum or a Commodore 64, to a 16-bit computer, like an Amiga 500 or an Atari, to a 32-bit computer or games console, like a 1200 or a PC, to a 64-bit one, and so on. It's like upgrade cycles are not necessarily once in a generation. They can be quite often. Now, within the same cycle, it may indeed be the case that that a technology comes a little bit later, such that the earlier one sort of gains enough share to sort of push that one out. But it can also go the other way. And you only have to look at games consoles to get an idea of when this can happen, right? The Dreamcast launched a little bit before the PlayStation, with Sega believing that by launching earlier, they would get that initial market traction and put Sony at a disadvantage. But in reality, Sony, the PlayStation, through simply being better technology, right? I mean, a better product, you can also say, but a product enabled by better technology actually became, way outsold the Dreamcast and dashed Sega's chances of ever doing hardware again. The third thing I'll say is that marketing is a lot of different things. I studied business at school. I wasn't very good at it, but I studied it. And one of the things that we learned was marketing is, I think it's the 3 Ps: price, product, promotion.
Yeah.
In crypto, marketing is often mixed up with promotion. Now, I'm not that interested in promotion. I don't understand promotion. I really don't. And I think actually not that many people do. It's a really tough one to understand how to promote your product. It's basically communication, but you have to have a really good idea about who your audience is. So I try to focus on the other 2. And the other 2, to some extent, are technologically enabled, right? Technology enables low price. Technology enables certain features in a product that wouldn't otherwise be possible. I'll give you an example. In Polkadot, by focusing on technology and creating parachains, we can have high security, but also provide a vast transaction throughput that isn't that retains its bandwidth, its throughput, regardless of what else is happening on Polkadot, right? Regardless of any of the other Parachains activities. And this is not something that is very easy to achieve. And you already see, like on Solana, if, for example, a certain well-known US figure launches a meme coin, it can have a detrimental impact on doing anything else on Solana at the time. The same happens on Ethereum, right? In the old days, if you did an ICO, you had to be very careful about what time you picked to do the ICO, because if you accidentally had it overlapping with another ICO, then you kind of screw yourself potentially. These are things to be cognizant of. Now, sometimes you have to make a judgment call over what elements of a product you want to prioritize and what elements of price you want to, whether you prioritize price over product, and what parts of the product you want to prioritize. And sometimes you make the wrong call because you don't understand where things are going, or because to set off down that line of technology, you're not going to have anything to show for it for like 2-3 years because it's a significant investment. And you don't know exactly what people are going to be after 2 to 3 years' time. So generally, it's best to stay flexible and try to do the things that you believe other people are going to have greater difficulty in doing than yourself. Understand your own core competencies. And that's largely the spot that I come from. It's solve the tough problems, because the tough problems are the things that will need solving anyway. And there's surely a product in there. Like, if you solve a tough problem, you're going to open up a number of different product directions. Like, it's not that like creating, Polkadot Parachains and elves, right? This system by which, we can have dramatically huge amounts of trust-free computation and bandwidth. It's not that this was necessarily a great product in and of itself. And I think there is some argument that it did enable directly certain products, but did immediately and directly create certain product or make possible certain products. But I think as a base layer, as an enabling technology, there are all sorts of other products that it can potentially enable. I'll give you an example. The concept of doing laser, like creating consumer lasers. This is something that was pretty niche, right? Up until the 80s, and then Philips came out with a CD, and it, on the back of that, enabled a very important piece of technology, a very important product. The same technology, a few years later, 10 years later, enabled a second product. I mean, more or less the same technology. They had to change the color of the laser, but basically the same technology enabled DVDs, and went on to enable Super Audio CDs, went on to enable Blu-rays, went on to enable before then these mad laserdisc things that are like vinyls, CD vinyls, but had an MPEG-1 film on. And this all comes basically from understanding how to create cheap lasers and shine a laser at a metal surface with holes in and measure back whether there's a hole there or not. Very, very, all of this stuff, this was solved for the CD and reused time and time and time again for other products. Changing the form factor a little, making it bigger, or changing the laser color, or making the holes smaller, but basically the same technology. Well, that's kind of what the sort of theory is with Polkadot. Is like, we've done the hard thing now. We've made the first CD. Now we can tweak things to make great products with this technology. But we can't make the great products, at least not the products that we think are ultimately people are going to need. If they don't even know they want it, they're going to need it, until we've made this enabling technology. Yeah. Now you've got, in America, there's a bit of a different mindset, right? America, very Silicon Valley sort of dominated. And the mindset is much more incremental. And it's like, focus on what people want right now. If people want Facebook for dogs, build Facebook for dogs. It doesn't matter if it's not that valuable to humanity. It doesn't matter if it's going to be superseded by something else in 12 months' time. Give people their soma, right? Develop what people say they want, what you believe people are going to pay money for right now. And I mean, that's fine, but it's not, this isn't what excites me. I'm not, I think I would have quit this industry long ago if that were the task that I would have to do. Just basically give people the next 12 months product, right? The next Facebook for dogs.
You talked about Facebook for dogs. And before you said maybe the next generation will store their wealth in Bitcoin or maybe in some bullshit meme coin. If you had 100 lives, is there at least one of those 100 lives in which you'd understand why a fart coin has real, long-lasting monetary value attached to it? Because in the world of internet, fun and stupidity drives attention, and attention drives liquidity. Has real, long-lasting monetary value attached to it, because in the world of internet, fun and stupidity drives attention, and attention drives liquidity.
So I think it is important for stuff to be fun. I don't know how important it is for stuff to be stupid, but I can certainly see that part of fun is goofiness. And this is especially important in a world that is as fucked as ours right now. It doesn't take much to look at. Like, you don't have to look around yourself so much to see despair and darkness and malice and hatred, right? It's becoming kind of the norm. The hope that was that sort of suffused society, or at least sort of my society, in the 90s, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain and freedom being given to so many people and it being relatively bloodless and This is kind of gone, right? This is generational gap material, right? And what we're dealing with now is just, for want of a better word, kind of hopelessness and resignation. And I can see why fun and goofiness, it's a form of escapism. I do not believe this is the basis of a particularly sensible global financial framework. I mean, maybe the markets kind of disagree with me on this, but at the moment, but I don't. I mean, I think it's a society losing touch with reality, and I do not think I think it's a bad omen, for sure. I think it's a bit understandable, and I'm, doing my best to sort of rationalize it. But I do think there is some nugget of a lesson in here, and that is make sure your products are easily engageable with, make sure they're fun, and make sure they're on the right level for the participants. And this is a little bit something that we're sort of taking to heart with the Polkadot app, but I think it's particularly something that that I'm thinking about how and sort of comparing to and kind of cross-referencing with for the individuality, the proof of personhood app. Because I think this is really where we can make something that teaches, I guess, the meme coiners a thing or two.
You like the tech, so let's talk about the tech.
All right.
You're the co-founder of Ethereum, the creator of the Solidity language and the Ethereum virtual machine. And you're also the founder of Polkadot, so you're probably one of the best persons to answer my tech questions on Ethereum and Polkadot. Ethereum has something called rollups or layer 2s. Layer 2s have led the entire Ethereum ecosystem into a sort of existential crisis, especially because layer 2s extract value from the layer 1. Polkadot version 1 or 1.0 has something called Parachains. Are Parachains and layer 2s the same thing?
We are starting to try and coalesce the terminology, in part to try to help people properly frame Polkadot. Parachains is at risk of being a jargon term, like something that just is a black hole in terms of semantics, in terms of meaning. Mainly because it only applies within the Polkadot world, which is a relatively sort of provincial area of the industry. They are different, or rather they're implemented in different ways. And I think conceptually they're very sort of different. There's a different intention behind them. Polkadot is, its primary purpose is to host rollups, right? Host these L2s, if you like, these parachains. That was the product proposition of Polkadot. It's actually less the product proposition of JAM. And one of the few reasons that I could see for making JAM a sort of different thing to Polkadot would be because the product proposition is different. Polkadot's product was Parachains. And as Polkadot evolves, it evolves with Parachain. The Parachains are evolving, but it's still very centered around Parachains. JAM is not. JAM doesn't make any mention of Parachains within its protocol specification. And my concern with that would just be that it would be easy for people to disregard JAM on the assumption that it doesn't change any aspect of the core Polkadot product, which is Parachains. Anyway, compared to Ethereum, the L2s extract value from the L1 in Ethereum's case, in large part because the L1 is not about being purely a roll-up host. Ethereum is a smart contract chain. It aims to host smart contracts that do all sorts of things. DEXs and NFTs and bullshit meme coins and all the rest of it. By moving these things into the L2, turning Ethereum into just a roll-up chain, it compromises the product proposition of Ethereum. I mean, it alters it. And in principle, it may, like, Ethereum is not a particularly well-optimized roll-up chain. I think last time I checked, if the rollups are all ZK rollups, then at present, with the current sort of gas stuff, I think it can host about 40, 45 rollups. Now maybe that can change down the line. Maybe it can host a few more. But and this is one aspect of rollups, I should hasten to say. It doesn't do availability. So basically, it manages the correctness of computation, but it doesn't handle any of the sort of data availability stuff. From the get-go, Polkadot tried to create the best, like I could see this already the writing was on the wall, right? Could see this already happening in the Ethereum ecosystem, or we theorized that this was already going to happen. And so the purpose of, or the product thesis of Polkadot was to essentially sort of beat it at its own game and come up with a much better version of this product. And I think to a large extent we did. Or at least, no, I think to a large extent we did. Now, I think Ethereum had a significant advantage through first mover, right? And it had a significant advantage through market capitalization. And I think it also, there were a few other sort of, it's not like, I mean, you know, Polkadot had its own smart contract language, yet it didn't have its own smart contract chain. Ethereum sort of did sort of have its own smart contract chain because it used the L1 could host smart contracts. Polkadot, it never did that. And so there was I think these were the three things that Ethereum sort of had that Polkadot didn't have. And in the last case, this is something that we've sort of hastened to change with the Polkadot Hub. So introduce a Polkadot native smart contract environment that works fast. And I think this is something that Solana realized quite early on. It was like, ignore rollups. Polkadot's got that covered, right? Zero in on the smart contract. Hub vibe, just basically, this is for smart contracts. We're going to process 10 times as many smart contract transactions as Ethereum. Move your stuff here and then do a lot of promotion. I think then that's fine, but as I've spoke about at length, that's not a long-term thing, right? That's a give them what they want for the next 12 months thing. Long-term computation has to be distributed. There's no other way of doing it. You have to scale out. You can't scale up. To use Silicon Valley's own term, adages against it. And I think one of the other key sort of tech differences, the distinctions that I'd make between what Polkadot's parachains are and what Ethereum's L2s are, is that because Polkadot provides a custom-made roll-up chain, like the Polkadot relay chain, it's able to very quickly and efficiently transmit messages between its constituent chains. Ethereum, because it didn't really do this, like it's sort of an accidental roll-up chain. It's really a smart contract chain that's just being used or abused for to host rollups. It doesn't have this this functionality, and it's going to be hard to retrofit it. And I think this also is a key difference, in large part because it forces its L2s into silos. So they become less. They inadvertently extract more value from the L1 because the L1 can't provide it with the connectivity to the other L2s. So basically that value disappears into one avenue, one L2, and it's kind of stuck there. In Polkadot, dot that disappears, dot that goes into, I don't know, Akala, is still immediately transferable into Moonbeam. So the capital flows a lot easier between the L2s. It doesn't take 4 days for the capital to get from A to B. And this, I think, is a crucial difference.
So you're saying you theorized or anticipated the future problems that Ethereum would have with layer 2s, and then you came up with this concept of parachains. Would you say that the concept of Polkadot parachains was a success?
I would say the product the Parachains product has demonstrable value in the market. And I think it's something that people are willing to take a punt on and pay money for. And I would draw attention to those projects that I know have been heavily lobbied with very large checks from other L1 chains to join their ecosystem, and that have refused on the basis that what they want to achieve is simply not possible. That they care about the platform they're on and the technological possibilities that platform gives. I don't think that's true across the board. And I think there are plenty of sort of people coming to crypto that don't care that much about their product, that look upon it as a reasonably easy way of making a bit of extra cash, and are happy to take, 30 mil up front in order to sign on the dotted line, for example.
A little bit of an extra cash.
Right. And this is unfortunately promotion. This is what counts as promotion in this industry. And it's a bit sick in my mind. It's like, but I guess to some extent it works. It's not generally the way that we roll in Polkadot. We try to actually provide what we believe is the right technology, and we try to find the teams and the products that are to be built on Polkadot on the basis of those that are actually going to use Polkadot, that need Polkadot. Yeah. Because there are many that don't. If you want to launch a meme coin, you don't need Polkadot, right? I mean, you can probably do it without without screwing up the rest of Polkadot. If it's a big one, more than you can without screwing up the rest of Solana when launching it. But that's for the people that launch meme coins. I guess they don't really care about what's going on in the rest of the network, so it doesn't really matter for them. But no, I think the Parachains product, in and of itself, has shown substantial success. Unfortunately, success in crypto is a weird thing, right? It's more about fart coin level. So that's what most people in crypto, when they hear the word success, they think, success like fart coin and Dogecoin, right? But I think for me, success has a bit more of a traditional sort of Warren Buffett kind of mindset. I want to see utility. I want to see meat and bones. Like, I don't want to see just vapid nonsense. Like, and if it's not why I'm here to build vapid nonsense. Like, I'm okay with people building vapid nonsense on my stuff, but like, that's not what I'm going to design the systems for. Yeah. And Parachains are able to do useful stuff, right? If you look at what Frequency is doing with the decentralized social network graph, if you look at what Mythos is doing with in-game assets, these are things that you just can't, like, they're replacing centralized services that are doing what people consider like useful things, legitimately like holding virtual assets, holding the ownership of virtual assets that can be used in game. Borderline, maybe. It's still like fun and games, but still, I think it's reasonable. It's a major industry, and it's a mature industry as well. Decentralized social network graph. It's doing something that would otherwise be handled on centralized servers. Social networking, again, mature use case. So yeah, I would definitely argue that the Parachains product is being put to substantial use and can be rightly regarded as a success. Not in the fart coin way necessarily, but in the Warren Buffett way.
What's a better alternative to the Parachain model?
I think there are some things that are just, they belong on their own chain. They don't need to interact with other data systems nearly so much as they need to interact with themselves. They are very particular sort of domain-specific systems or logic. I think it's in these cases, it's perfectly reasonable to have a parachain. And maybe you're going to attach one core to it, maybe you're going to attach half a core to it, maybe you're going to attach 12 cores to it, right? Depending on how much throughput you need. And this is like Polkadot can totally do this, right? And this is super exciting product for when this this what we call like I think we're calling it like multi-core elastic scaling, fixed factor scaling. We've got a few different names for a few different products, but the basic concept is make your chain run faster, do more transactions, just pay for the extra cores when you need them. This turns Polkadot from this completes the Polkadot 2 transition, and it, in my mind, can unlock can be a significant factor in unlocking Polkadot's sort of tokenomics, right? The dot tokenomics it's all about paying for parachains. I mean, you've got the staking and the governance, but these are sort of self-serving things. Parachains is actually has strict utility, right? Outside external utility. But at the moment, it's problematic because we have like, I don't know, 45 cores and 45 parachains. It's like, and parachains can only use one core because the technology hasn't been launched yet that allows them to use multiple cores if they want to. And so basically the price, even though it's a market, the price tends towards zero because no one needs an extra core. There's only 45 possible purchasers. They only want one core. Like the supply is 45, the demand is 45. The price therefore tends to zero, tends to the threshold amount. But when we get an elastic demand, the demand is theoretically elastic, right? There are chains out there that would love to pay more money, more DOT, and have more cores, make their chains go faster. They exist. We know they exist. We talk to them. And they're willing to pay quite a lot more money, right? For them, it's they want to get more users, they want to process more transactions, they want to have cheaper transactions, and so they're willing to basically put up that money. But at the moment they can't. It hasn't been unlocked yet. Technology can unlock it. Technology basically says it's once you upgrade, once we make this upgrade, you can use 10 cores if you want. Pay 10 times. Well, that's the thing. It's not clear it'll be 10 times as much, right? Because the supply is still fixed, but we're unleashing the demand. And that, in my opinion, is going to be a very interesting turn in dot tokenomics.
When is that happening?
Like, I don't know, in the next it's like a month or two away. I don't know, like this summer / early autumn, but it's around the corner. The technology's already been deployed on West End, the testnet, and I think it is currently in the process of being deployed on Kusama, and then once it's there and operating okay, it moves to Polkadot. But I think it's in a small number of months. Like I think I said 1 to 2. I think I said 1 or 2 months in a slightly flippant tone a month ago. So it's not far off. It's not my department, so I can't really comment much more. But if you want to tune into the fellowship monthly calls, then there's an update on it every month. The JAM is a little different. JAM doesn't have parachains. For JAM, the product it's sort of a stripped away the parachains product, and it has a rawer product, like a product that's like in some sense, like it's less refined. It's less specific. It's less refined. But it opens up a vast amount more flexibility. And already one of those sort of pieces of flexibility that we're showing is we did, a month or two back with the Doom demo, right? This idea of basically running any kind of code on chain, not just blockchain code, not just an L2 rollup, but like a regular PC executable. I mean, run Windows on chain if you want, that sort of thing. And this becomes very interesting, I would say. This for me, as a curious person, as a curious dev, opens up a lot of avenues that I would want to experiment with.
You're building JAM, Joint Accumulate Machine. We briefly explained JAM during our last conversation. Let's do it again. Can you explain JAM simply, no jargon?
Not really, no.
At least you're honest.
I can't, no. And there's a reason why I can't. JAM is not a consumer-facing product. It's not a product like Fartcoin, right? It's not intended to be. If you want a kind of ish example of what JAM is without jargon, it's a little bit like taking Polkadot's technology and kind of crossing it with the Ethereum, like kind of smart contracts, much more permissionless, much more accessible sort of environment.
When you mean accessible, you mean more developers from different backgrounds and different coding languages can come and join and build something?
Well, Ethereum didn't have really many different coding languages, but Ethereum was accessible because you didn't have to pay so much and you could send a transaction to the chain, right? And Ethereum would process it. You didn't have to pay so much, you could deploy a smart contract, right? And just sort of sit there. And then if you left it for a year and then came back, you could still send a transaction to it and do stuff with it. So it was accessible in that you didn't have to kind of be a parachain team, like which is a substantial sort of technical investment, right? We've made it a lot easier than it was, but it's still a technical investment. You still have to, creating a parachain is a non-trivial thing to do compared to creating a smart contract, which is relatively easy. JAM aims to move it back into so it takes Polkadot technology, but it averts the need to do your own chains, to create and deploy and maintain your own blockchain. Instead, you can use it much more like how you would use Ethereum. So you can easily just deploy code and it'll be there and just sort of sit there, and then you could kind of use it. And you can there are some very key differences with exactly how you can use it that make it strictly more powerful than like a lot more powerful than Ethereum. And then I have to get into like the technical details of how computers work, which isn't maybe so good. I'm going to end up having to use jargon, or at least technical terms. But at a basic level, it's Polkadot, but it can be used or interacted with in a much more Ethereum-like way. But it comes with all the power and punch of Polkadot. In fact, more so, right? It's quite a bit more. I think it's like, I don't know. The numbers are substantial anyway. 8 to 60x more powerful than Polkadot is, right? And like crazy amounts more powerful than Ethereum is. Like a quadrillion gas. It's like, I don't know, a billion times more, a billion times more powerful, something like that. Anyway, very, very much more powerful. Why bother trying to make it so much more powerful when all people want to do is launch Fartcoin? Well, because if you have a crappy system, people will do crappy things. The system implies the use case, right? Ethereum was less crappy, or was to some extent like, it had some flexibility, some kind of power over what you could use it for, more so than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, what do you see on Bitcoin? Well, people used it for holding Bitcoins. And then there were used colored coins, these kind of like early meme coin NFT things. And that was about all they did. Well, they had multi-sigs as well. That was about all they did on Bitcoin. Now, theoretically, you could use Bitcoin for doing other stuff as well, for doing a number of different sort of smart contracts. But people never did because it was so much of a pain in the ass. Like, it was really not designed for that, and it showed. And then Ethereum came along, and it was more designed for doing these like name coin style things. Like, you have name registries, you can have NFTs, you can have DEXs, right? And we see a bunch of these sort of things crop up on Ethereum. But the use cases are still quite limited, right? That Ethereum is not directly usable for an awful lot of stuff. You could probably name the major use cases on like 10 fingers, and you probably enumerate them. There's not that much that happens of any significance on Ethereum. And then why not? Well, because it's too hard. Like, it's not designed for that. It's not powerful enough. Yeah, you're limited in terms of block gas limits. Yeah, and then before long you have to use something that uses Ethereum, right? So you use EigenLayer, for example. You put all of your actual logic off-chain on EigenLayer, and then EigenLayer uses all of its cunning stuff in order to just have Ethereum check it. And Ethereum, at the end of the day, all it's doing is a bit of CK work. Yeah. Same with kind of L2 rollups. Ethereum ends up not doing the work itself, but just checking. This isn't necessarily so good for Ethereum. It's not necessarily such a great long-term plan for Ethereum. And I think this was brought up quite recently in the last few months in the Ethereum community. It's like, guys, do we really want all of the value-producing stuff to happen inside of an L2 that is not using ETH as its token? And yeah, the answer was quite resoundingly, maybe we don't want that, actually. And I think, what we do with JAM is try to bring everything back to the L1, like really try to put everything in the quote unquote L1, all that logic, and impart that, but allow us to scale to ridiculous levels, and in doing so unlock use cases that just unimaginable on Ethereum, use cases that similarly unimaginable on Bitcoin that Ethereum kind of managed to own, right?
An example?
Oh, like DEXs. You couldn't have a DEX, a modern DEX on Ethereum, on Bitcoin, right? On Ethereum, it's trivial. But what could JAM do? This is hard, because until you've got the system, you're playing around with it. It's like really difficult to imagine what it is that you could do with it. But as a simple, like mad example, like you'd run Linux on it. Like run Linux on chain. It's like run a regular operating system. What does that mean? I don't really know. But like it's crazy, but it could do. Like, we have enough compute power to do this. You can run. So one of the things that I think is under, like we've demonstrated, you can run a game on chain, right? Doom, and it runs through the game, and it does all the computation that's needed, and it has all of the data that sort of gets flipped in and mutated and moved back out again. And it also exports a feed of uncompressed video frames that you can watch in real time. And there's some lag, right? There's some latency, but you can. The blockchain can output video frames and at a sufficient rate that you can watch it without glitches in real time. And as I said, that's without compression. It doesn't use much CPU, much core within JAM. This might. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm kind of wondering if this might have some interesting repercussions within the sort of gaming world. Maybe combining games with economic signaling. This could have an interesting impact. It might have to be combined with some cunning sort of L2 thing that can sequence stuff, because with games, there's an awful lot of a lot of the importance is latency. So players want to see what other players have done and react to that. And the faster that they can see and react, the more, at least for some games, the more interesting the game is. But not necessarily for all games. Card games, types of real-time strategy, or types of strategy games aren't so relevant. Like you can play Settlers and you don't really need to, this game, Settlers of Catan. And you don't really need to have millisecond by millisecond interactions with other players. That's not important. So I think it would be interesting to try to imagine how we might combine the worlds of crypto and gaming. And it might very well be that you need sophisticated logic in order to do that in any sensible way. But I don't know. I have to build it and play with it, and then I can give you a better answer. But I do know that it's a categorically different amount of computation that we're playing with, different amount of storage that we're playing with. It's like a different computer. It's basically like spending your days messing around on like an Amiga 500, sort of 16-bit computer, and then someone then just giving you a PC. And it's like, this is 32-bit, and it's got 10 times the amount of memory, and it's got a hard disk instead of floppy disk. And it's got a floating point unit and da-da-da. It's like, this is just a fundamentally different beast to play on. I don't know what you can do on this that you can't do on that, but I am certain there is some.
You mentioned before people from the community, from the Polkadot community, asking whether JAM would have a token or not. Is JAM good for the Polkadot ecosystem and for DOT, the Polkadot token?
Yeah, I don't know. I would have hoped to say absolutely yes. But, I look at Ethereum, right? And it's like, is the ETH2 thing good for Ethereum? Well, since Ethereum has sort of restated its commitment to doing quote unquote native rollups and actually, making Ethereum good, like increasing its throughput, all the rest of it, the price hasn't done very much. It wasn't apparently that mental shift shared within the Ethereum technical community wasn't enough to make significant movements in the market. Quite the opposite. It's only gone down since then.
It kind of marked the top of ETH BTC, actually.
So it's like, I don't know if it's good. Like, I mean, in my mind, it shows that, the technical leadership behind Polkadot knows what it's doing, has a plan, and has a pretty impressive product that they build, going to deliver in the not too distant future. I would say it's like pretty good for Polkadot. I don't know. Apparently I'm out of touch.
Love the honesty. I think it's very important. Has Ethereum layer 2 approach and execution failed?
Ethereum 2 execution.
Layer 2 approach.
Layer 2 approach. Yeah, I mean, obviously. I mean, it's a terrible approach.
Why?
It was because it didn't have any philosophy behind it. It didn't have any theory behind it. It was just a response to large, influential, individual projects that didn't want to see their reason to be collapse. Because the layer 1 got good enough that there's no need for layer 2s. It was an unfortunate decision an unfortunate mind virus that's somehow implanted itself within Ethereum's leadership. But it was, in my mind, nonsensical from day one. And it was just the fact that it was pandering to incumbent lobbyists, in my mind. That's how I explain it. I can't see this as like something that it was a big mistake, right? A really big mistake. It was a years long decision that has now been reversed. So it seems to me that I can't believe that Ethereum lacked the intellect the aggregated intellect to see this. I can only explain it in political terms as two forces, one of which was dominant, the L2 masters, and one of which was non-dominant, and they were trying to work their way around the L2 masters. And finally, someone seems to have realized, guys, maybe not.
So the L2 masters have invested years and a lot of money into that, and had enough power to kind of take over or impose their views.
It's the only way I can explain it to myself. And, I talked to a couple of people who are footprint in the Ethereum ecosystem, and that's their opinion as well. It makes sense to me, but I don't know. I'm not a fly on the wall. I don't know what the conversations were. And I don't know. I do know that L2 leaders have their own token investors that want to see their token do well at the cost of Ethereum. These guys are not, it's not, you don't have to hold more ETH than you do Matic. Yeah. They will have their own masters, and it's a cutthroat industry. So why would they act in Ethereum's best interests? No, they'll lobby for their own interests. I would obviously expect that. Now, the thing is, what the Ethereum leadership needs to do is, and I say this as someone that has some not insignificant ETH reserves, ETH holdings. What the Ethereum leadership needs to do is understand this and act accordingly. I think maybe slowly that's happening. But no, it was a misstep, and it was a long, in my mind, obvious misstep.
I read a very interesting tweet that you reacted to.
Uh-huh.
I took just a chunk of it. Crypto didn't liberate anything. It just strapped a token to every soul and called it progress. I vented to a friend. They said, that's not crypto, that's money. Money corrupts everything it touches. And yeah, maybe that's the problem. As time passes, the case of crypto critique becomes clearer and clearer. We need more criticism and self-reflection. The direction is wrong. Has crypto failed?
Yep. Has it failed? I think it's not over yet. Is it in part going down the path to obsolescence and assimilation into the establishment that it was created as a backstop against? Yes, definitely. Have individuals that wield influence within crypto made bad decisions over the direction of their projects? Yes. Do we see self-interest trumping anything that we might consider sort of cypherpunk ideals? Yes, a lot. Do we see corners being cut to the point that it no longer makes sense to call this stuff properly kind of crypto? Yes. It's not over. I think to say it's failed implies that, it's over and we have to evaluate it. These things were always, there was always this in the industry, right? If you go back to like 2013, right, there was still like bullshit coins out there. One of them somehow survived and flourished. Few of them, but Doge in particular. But I mean, it's not that there isn't self-interest. It's not that money was never not its mischievous self. I think it's just that if we look at firstly, there are those that have been around in the crypto ecosystem for 10 plus years. Lefteris is one of them, right? I actually hired him into ETHDev when we were building Ethereum back in 2014, I believe. And he I mean, yeah, it's been around a long time, and you expect to see, as a dev, you expect to see, you build things of the order of maybe, I mean, it could be a couple day hackathon, and at the most, maybe you spend a year and a half coding something, right? It's very few people that are on projects that take longer than a year and a half to sort of see something from it. That's our time horizon is generally that or less. There are one or two I could name, like Donald Knuth doing tech for 10 years, but they're few and far between. And we've been in this industry for 10 plus years now. And if we look at what it is that we've built, it doesn't measure up to how we wanted, to the products that we wanted to build and the impact we wanted to have back then. Now, in part, that's not our fault. I mean, it's easy as a coder to underestimate how hard something is to build. We're not building bridges. Coding is more akin to research than it is to architecture. A lot of people misunderstand this. The other thing is it takes society to want the products or indeed need the products. Now, there are some products that this society has figured out it needed, right? And I mean, I think Bitcoin and I think Tron is a very good example of this. Like, people realized they needed stablecoins.
Yeah.
Right? They were a great alternative to banks, right? And early on, it was, you sent remittances by Bitcoin, right? And this was a good alternative to Western Union. These days, it seems that it's moving into USDT on Tron. I mean, I think it's kind of dumb that it's on Tron. The fees are ridiculous, but it is what it is, and it's like it's at least it's achieving some utility. And I think it's easy to become disheartened when you look and you see, of all the things that we've managed to achieve over 10 years, the utility. There's a handful of things that appear to be useful. Just you can either reasonably or just about squint your eyes and see that they're useful. And then the rest is just like fart coins. Yeah, it's easy to become disheartened. And I can see where it comes from.
You commented on this last week. I see a similar shift in this industry. So there are some whose direction has remained largely unchanged for a decade. Lessons, no doubt, learned along the way, but core principles unwavering. A desire not just to do great engineering for joyous products useful to many, but to achieve true decentralization and build systems that stand the test of time. If the majority of the people, or many of the people who joined crypto 10, 12, 13 years ago with the right ethos have now left the industry because they became too rich, how on earth do we get this industry back on the right track?
I suppose others will come. I mean, I don't know. Why did I come? Curiosity, right? It wasn't because I wasn't like, I don't know, anything special. Like, I didn't like, there's no reason to believe it was, I didn't join crypto because, or at least not solely because, everyone else in crypto was so fucking cool or was so cypherpunkish, right? They weren't. Not at the time that I decided to join anyway. I eventually met some cool people, but many of them I recruited myself. I don't see it as being an existential threat. At all. No, I think in many respects it needs some fresh blood, right? It needs some new perspectives, new imaginations. Because you know what? It's the same. It's like what I was saying with JAM. JAM enables, vast amounts more stuff, right? It's like a new type of computer. You can do categorically orders of like different, you can solve different problems on it orders of magnitude more computation and storage. But what does it mean, or how are we supposed to use this if everyone that is going to use it grew up with Bitcoin and Ethereum and views blockchain and crypto as this stuff? Eventually, we're just going to have really, really fast NFTs. Well, who the fuck cares? It's not important. You know, we do not get anywhere by just having faster versions of what we already have. Not really. It's the old Betamax problem, right? We need to bring people in that are going to do new stuff. They're going to unlock. They're going to use the facilitating technology to unlock new use cases, to imagine and develop new use cases. The technology facilitates that, it unlocks that, but it doesn't mean that that people that are used to the existing stuff are instantly going to be able to use this. It's a bit of a sort of generational thing, right? They kind of have to be kind of wholly new to the thing, and then you kind of just show them, look, you can write regular C++ code, compile it, and it just kind of runs. And then they go, oh, so I can just run anything on this magic internet supercomputer. Yes, that's what JAM is. Magic internet supercomputer. Oh, there you go. That's your answer from before. Magic internet supercomputer. And it's like, you know, people, if I took an Ethereum coder and I said, oh, JAM's a magic internet supercomputer, or I tried to explain it in terms of Polkadot and Ethereum, they would probably just go, oh, so I can run a DEX that can process 100,000 transactions a second instead of 1,000 transactions. It's like, yeah, but, you know, that's not what it's about. Yeah? And I think we shouldn't, therefore, be worried about any kind of exodus. Kind of the opposite. It's by those that have been in the ecosystem or the industry thus far leaving that kind of room is made.
Yeah.
Thought like mind space, thought leadership is made for space in it is made for new joiners.
So it's actually a good thing.
It's
not a bad thing, at least.
I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a necessary thing as well.
What's the single most important thing to you in life?
Didn't I answer this last time? Single most important thing to me. Health, I guess. Health is pretty important to me. My kids are pretty important to me. My friends. My freedom. I don't know. There's a few different bits that are important. Not sure if I could name one of them. I guess health.
When did you realize that?
That health is important.
Where?
I don't think I realize it in a truly, you know, I don't know. I think it's always been there, right? My mum was sort of health conscious and instilled that into me as a kid. But it's in my mind, health and happiness and family life and all this stuff. It's a mix. Like one of them isn't so, you know, if you pull them apart, they're not so useful kind of on their own. And I think it's therefore important to ensure that you get the things sort of prioritized so you don't sort of having one over any of the others. They're all important. I'll tell you, I say one thing though, money is a mixed blessing.
Mixed. Last time you said money is a fool's game. So this sounds more optimistic. This sounds more optimistic.
So I think making it, like specifically chasing wealth, is a fool's game. But once you have some wealth, it's a mixed blessing.
Why mixed?
Becomes a burden. But it can also unlock certain doors. But sometimes there's doors, they're just kind of red herrings in life and they're just a waste of time. So yeah, it's a mixed blessing.
What's some example of burdens that wealth brings?
Well, you have to look after the wealth for a start.
You don't want to lose it.
Well, indeed. I mean, if you can totally, the less the wealth matters to you, like the more you're mentally capable of just disregarding it, the less of a hold it has over you and the less of a problem it is, the less of that downside, that burden it has. I think it's still there for most people. We have a sort of innate desire to, like, you know, preserve our wealth, preserve our possessions. Yeah, like I said, and some doors that it unlocks in life are not necessarily doors that are going to give you happiness.
For example?
Well, for example, you might, suppose you buy a country home, right? And you think, all right, I'm going to live classic country home, English aristocrat, right? I'm going to have a butler and a maid and a kitchen staff and cleaning and all of this stuff, right? I'm going to live the life. Just like on that show, Downton Abbey. Well, this comes at a cost, right? It comes at a big cost. It comes at the cost of privacy. It comes at you have to burden yourself. You now have one place that you kind of feel that you should be, as opposed to anywhere else. And sometimes maybe you want to be somewhere else, but you kind of feel bad because you're running this show over at your country house, and you know, there's no point like spending all that money if you don't want to be there. Sunken loss fallacy. And so this is a sort of dumb example, but it is one that I've kind of a little bit come across. I have a little bit of experience with this. And it can impact how enjoyable life is, how free you feel. And it can kind of like I never really worked a sort of 9 till 5. I mean, I did for a year or something, a 9 to 5 job where I sort of rocked it at 9 o'clock on the dot, because if you're a minute late, then they get really pissed off, and then work for 8 hours or whatever, and then shove off at 5:30. You do this, and I did it, and I felt time was slipping away from me. It's like I didn't, I became a kind of servant to the lifestyle. Kind of the lifestyle lived me. I didn't live the lifestyle. Didn't like that, which is why I quit. I wanted more control over my immediate sort of day-to-day life. I didn't want to have to rock up at 9, shove off at 5:30, always be here, right? And to this day, I don't, in Parity, there's no concept of doing this. Like, if people want to go to the office, they totally can, but we are totally remote work first. I believe, and we also don't have fixed office hours, right? I believe people should have control over this to the extent that society can provide them with it. And I think if you have money, you can become sort of lifestyle, like the lifestyle starts dominating you. And you believe that, you know, well, you have money and therefore you should have this lifestyle. But that's maybe how you get into it. But before long, it will kind of eat you up and you kind of make a prison for yourself. I actually came across one guy who was, his name is Haim. And he made a bit of, you know, he made a lot of money in the Web 2 boom around the sort of 2001 time.
What's a lot of money?
I don't know for sure, because he never told me. But I do know he has one of several possessions is an apartment building worth 25 million. So, and this is something that he could just leave and not think about, right? So I think it's certainly 8 figures, maybe 9. And he for a while he lived this kind of, well, this lifestyle kind of lived him. And in the end, he bought a boat and went off. He just lives on the boat with his wife, and they just sort of sail around. And this for them is just like far better than the alternative. They literally sold everything. They don't own like any homes. They don't hold. I mean, I guess they have some investments, but it's like a kind of hands-off thing. It's not like he was telling me he had like this family office and he had like various number of little army of employees that would like do all of this investments and manage all of this stuff and manage all the properties and manage all, And it was like, no. One day he just decided this is just way too much stress. The lifestyle is living me. And he went off, sold everything, went off on a boat. He didn't sell quite everything. There's still this apartment, but he was trying to sell that. It's a difficult one to sell.
I recently read the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. The book, in a nutshell, talks about the fact that every human has a dark side. So I'd like to ask you, what's the deepest and darkest side of yours that you have to deal with and have learned to control to master life?
I don't know. I guess it's something around injustice. Like if I see injustice, particularly injustice towards people that I have that I kind of identify with on some level, then it's very difficult for me.
Does it mean you're very empathetic?
Yeah, maybe, but I think it's a form of empathy. It's because it is a little bit limited, right? It's limited to those to peoples that I identify with. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a really obvious or immediate identification, but I think I wouldn't go as far as to say, I live all the world's problems. I don't. And obviously, the closer it gets to home, the less the injustice needs to be for me to feel the same thing, for it to bother me as much. And I actually saw a news interview with a guy called Rory Stewart. He was a British parliamentarian who challenged Boris Johnson several years ago to the prime ministerial office. He lost, obviously. Anyway, I saw one of his interviews, and he got onto the Afghan war or the Iraqi war, Iraqi war with in the Bush era, and asked if it was a reasonable course of action. He answered, "Ought follows can." That's not a phrase I had heard very much.
What does that mean?
It means you should not do something unless you are able to do something. Like you should not go about forcing a solution if you cannot be confident that you are able to actually solve it. And in this case, he specifically referenced perhaps Iraq had a problematic government. Like perhaps Iraqis deserved a better government, a more freer society, and all the rest of it. But the thing is, the US-led coalition was foolish to believe, if indeed it did believe, that it could impose a better government than the current situation, or a better state of affairs, right? And including all of the bloodshed that was that came about, all the corruption that came about, all everything. And his argument was that no one could reasonably have believed that it was possible, that you could confidently, credibly rationalize being able to create a better state of affairs over a sensible period of time by invading. Like this act of war did not and could never have rationally, credibly have believed to have been a sensible course of action in order to deliver a better situation for the Iraqi people. And there is I forget which philosopher, it's an old Western philosopher that came up with this principle, but this is a basic principle for political action, like for the action of a collective. Collective should not act with force unless it can reasonably, credibly believe that that force can solve the problem it pertains to solve. So one ought to do something only if one can do that thing. Can't use force if you're not sure that it's possible to use force to solve the problem. Like, can I fix this phone with my hammer? If the answer is yes, then you ought to do that. If the answer is no, then you ought not to do that. And I think that's what helped me deal with this feeling of sort of responsibility and duty and sort of sadness and bother that came from seeing injustice in the world, because an awful lot of it I can't fix. Like in fact, I don't think any of it I can really fix. Then what I can fix, probably what I'm doing right now, is the fastest way to fix it. Or the strongest way I could possibly fix it. And yeah, that runs from all levels, from like widespread, the genocide and ethnic cleansing that's going on, all the way down to my kids being unable to see their father.
Tell me something about your life that I can take with me for the next half of my life.
What would you want to do with the thing that I tell you?
I think what everyone wants to do, which is be happy.
Well, be happy. I think happiness is primarily found in a healthy degree of curiosity and and keeping yourself to having fun whilst doing it. I think curiosity is crucial. And yeah, not holding yourself to too high of a level of seriousness. I mean, I don't also think that doing the Elon Musk thing and making literally a joke out of literally everything is particularly sensible either. But I think having some attitude of being curious but having fun is the secret to happy.
Thank you, Gavin, for another fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Kevin.
And thank you for staying true to the true crypto ethos and values. We need more Gavins in our industry.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, some younger ones untainted by the last 10 years would be ideal.
Amazing. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers, Kevin.